Hey folks, Hirsch Jane here, Director of Market Intelligence at Verdant Strategies. Today I want to talk about the most important market in US cannabis right now, New York. When I say New York matters, I don't just mean for the operators doing business in the Empire State. I'm saying it matters for all of us in the cannabis industry. As we approach the 5-year anniversary of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, the MRTA, which passed in March 2021, the New York market is hitting an inflection point. This is the moment where New York cannabis has to decide what it wants to be when it grows up. Because the decisions that New York makes this year, in 2026, will determine whether the market fulfills its extraordinary economic promise in the years ahead, or whether it joins the long list of cannabis markets that, for one reason or another, never quite lived up to their potential. But to understand why this moment matters so much, we have to zoom out first. There are 4 states in America that are true economic powerhouses: California, Texas, Florida, and New York. Together, these 4 states are home to 115 million people, more than a third of the entire country, and generate nearly 40% of US GDP. If cannabis is going to be seen as a serious American industry, investable, scalable, nationally relevant, it has to work in at least one of those places. California has had nearly a decade to build a thriving adult use market, and yet it's still weighed down by punishing taxes, Byzantine regulations, relentless illicit competition, and a vacuum of political leadership. I wish I could say that's about to change, but it probably isn't. Texas and Florida tell a different story, but with a similar outcome. Massive populations, enormous consumer demand, clear public support for legalization. And still, conservative political leadership in both states continue to obstruct the cannabis reform that their citizens so clearly desire. That leaves New York, the global capital of finance, media, and influence. The only economic powerhouse state where adult use cannabis is legal, and the runway for success is still wide open. Now, don't get me wrong, states like Missouri and Montana have built impressive cannabis markets, billions in sales, industries that punch far above their weight. But New York is different. New York moves capital, shapes media narratives, and influences policy conversations. If New York succeeds, it will change how the country, and frankly the world, thinks about cannabis as an economic force. And if New York struggles, the ripple effects won't stop at the Hudson River. Now, we all remember New York's rollout was rocky. The good news? Things have gotten a lot better lately. In 2023, New York generated just $100 million in legal cannabis sales, a tiny fraction of its true market potential of at least $5 billion, probably more. But about 2 years ago, the market started to find its footing. In 2024, sales didn't just grow, they exploded, jumping from $100 million to nearly $900 million, almost a tenfold increase in a single year. Then, in 2025, the market nearly doubled again, reaching roughly $1.8 billion. No state in the country has grown at the pace New York has over the last 2 years. And all signs suggest this will be the 3rd straight year of industry-leading growth. The state could approach $2.5 billion in sales in 2026. And this growth is being powered by one main engine: retail expansion. At the start of 2024, there were only about 50 dispensaries open in New York, in a state with 20 million people. By the end of 2024, there were over 250 dispensaries, 5 times as many. By the end of 2025, more than 500 dispensaries. And by the end of 2026, we'll likely have more than 750 dispensaries statewide. That would be a 15-fold increase in the number of dispensaries in just 3 years. That rapid increase in dispensaries has dramatically improved access and brought hundreds of thousands of consumers into the legal market, unlocking latent demand that had been stuck in the illicit market. So, make no mistake, New York has been the greatest cannabis turnaround story in the country. But rapid growth can bring new pressures. As dispensary numbers have grown, sales per store have started to fall lately. According to the Office of Cannabis Management, revenue per dispensary dropped 25% last year, from $5 million in late 2024 to $3.8 million in late 2025. That's a big drop. So yes, total sales are rising, but retail economics are tightening. The era when simply opening a dispensary in New York guaranteed success is probably over. New York has entered the phase where execution will separate survivors from casualties. As margins tighten, vulnerabilities that rapid growth once masked are becoming visible. With revenue per store declining, inefficient cost structures start to reveal themselves. On paper, some businesses still look profitable. In reality, they're under cash flow strain, delaying vendor payments and quietly building credit risk across the supply chain. When retailers fall behind, distributors stretch payment terms, brands absorb growing receivables, cultivators hold inventory. The supply chain is quietly bankrolling growth that may exist more on paper than in reality. From the outside, everything looks fine. Sales are up, stores are opening, but underneath, cash flow is eroding, receivables are stretching, and balance sheets are quietly weakening. When that dynamic spreads across dozens or hundreds of operators at once, you start to see the makings of a credit bubble. Now, look, every market has winners and losers. That's normal. That's healthy. But we cannot let this turn into another herbal type debacle like we saw in California. When Herbal, one of California's largest distributors, collapsed in 2023, the damage didn't stop with one company. It rippled across the entire supply chain, froze payments, and shook confidence in the entire market. Many people walked away believing the system itself was broken, and maybe they had a point. Now, to be clear, New York is not on the brink of a collapse tomorrow. The market structure is different, the regulatory climate is different, there are more safeguards in place. But the risk pattern, tightening margins, rising credit exposure, hidden cash flow stress is familiar. And that's why it's worth talking about now, before small cracks turn into systemic problems. Because if something like that does ever happen in New York, the consequences would reach beyond operators there. It would fuel the narrative that legal cannabis in general can't work, while reinforcing the perception of New York's market as chaotic and unstable. We cannot afford that outcome. We all need New York to succeed, which is why operators need to stay disciplined right now, tightening business practices, managing credit carefully, and building companies that are profitable in reality, not just on paper. That's how we reduce the risk of an herbal-style shock, and how New York proves to the world that this industry has matured. But this isn't just on operators. Policymakers have responsibilities too. According to the OCM, enforcement against illicit operators in New York slowed significantly in 2025, with only 2,000 enforcement actions compared to more than 5,200 the year before. That matters and helps explain the 25% drop in sales per dispensary from 5 million to 3.8 million that legal retailers experienced in 2025. So yes, operators need to run disciplined businesses, but policymakers, especially Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Zoran Mandani, must fully enforce the laws already on the books. And this isn't just an industry talking point. Under the MRTA, legal cannabis tax revenue funds nonprofits, community programs, and social equity initiatives. When enforcement slips, those dollars disappear, and the communities politicians promise to support are the ones that pay the price. That's why legal operators shouldn't carry this message alone. They should be standing alongside the community groups and nonprofits that rely on cannabis tax revenue. Together, they need to make one thing clear. Enforcement against illegal sales isn't optional, it's essential. Without it, both the legal supply chain and the public benefits tied to it are at risk. Another major challenge that will require policymakers and operators to truly roll up their sleeves and work together this year is metric. A track and trace system is necessary to protect compliant operators, reduce diversion, and strengthen confidence in the regulated market. But implementation is everything. If the rollout is chaotic or poorly supported, it will disrupt legal businesses trying to follow the rules. On the other hand, if it's perpetually delayed, it leaves gaps that undermine trust in the legal system. That tension is already playing out in New York. A group of operators have filed a lawsuit to halt Metric's implementation, arguing that tagging requirements and added compliance costs tied to Metric are difficult to absorb, especially for smaller businesses. A lot of that is true. On the ground, companies are reporting integration glitches, rejected data entries, tag shipment delays, and hours of manual workarounds. Tasks that once took minutes are now taking hours, straining staff time and cash flow. At the same time, regulators and many legal operators maintain that Metric is essential for improving product safety, transparency, and protecting against diversion. And they're not wrong. So the industry is caught between two competing imperatives: strong oversight that ensures the integrity of the legal supply chain, and a rollout that doesn't destabilize the legal market it's meant to legitimize. This is the biggest problem that New York needs to solve in 2026. Implementing a tracking system strong enough to protect market integrity, yet workable enough that operators can realistically comply. Can it be done? I think so, but it will require policymakers and operators working together on a solution, not just fighting. My 2 cents, addressing the retail ID requirement, which operators have described as particularly onerous, might be the place to start. So, to wrap this all up, whether we're talking about enforcement against the illicit market, the financial discipline of legal operators, or the implementation of track and trace, 2026 is going to be the year that will shape the New York market for years to come. 5 years after legalization, the industry is no longer in its infancy. New York needs to decide this year what it wants to be when it grows up. If New York gets this right, it won't just be on its way to building a $5 billion industry. It will build a blueprint for how cannabis can operate inside one of the most complex, visible, and influential economies in the world. It can be the market that finally proves cannabis can function at the highest levels of American commerce, under scrutiny, under regulation, and under the spotlight of global capital. That's what's at stake. New York isn't just building a market, it's helping shape the economic future of legal cannabis in the United States. And so, we need New York to get it right.